It's a philosophy of going the extra mile. It's the do unto others. It's part of our mission statement is to follow the golden rule, and that really breaks down to treating other people as you want to be treated, giving the kind of service that you want to give. People don't talk about average service. People only talk about really great service or really lousy service. We want our customers to talk about us, but we want them to talk about us, our great service. That's what we're trying to get them to talk about. Average service, nobody talks about. We want them to talk about our great service. And we do a lot of things. Our employees look for ways to kind of go over the top. And in this company, they're rewarded when they do that. I hope there's hundreds of examples out there, and I hope there are 100 more still to come.
Wrapped up, come back and begin your budget discussions. Continue your budget discussions. Really appreciate the time and effort all of y'all spending here last week. I think we've really covered it and everybody has a good grasp of it. We'll move forward today. We do have some additional information.
I think I could put this in here for the purpose of the staff and everything. This was my ninth budget, and this one was so well presented. The details of it, the facts that were there, the presentation, it was just...
The summary really helped us start.
Yes, so it was well done. And I know that a lot of
Michelle
people
and Laura
put in
and
a lot
Curtis.
of work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
A lot of new department heads doing that too.
Yeah, Michelle speaks my language too, which should worry you.
Should I ask which language that might be?
Yeah. Well, it's not math. I mean, she's able to communicate it with me.
It's always been one of Michelle's talents. She can take something pretty complex and communicate it well. Okay, jump into the agenda. The first item, of course, is the minutes of the regular meeting from last week. They look okay. Thank you, ma'am. We'll move to item number 2, ordinance 7425. This is the first reading of the ordinance that would order a special election to be held on Tuesday, November 5, to vote on proposed amendments to the city charter. The draft ordinance that you have attached has 22 amendments, certainly up for discussion today. End up where you need to end up. We have provided explanatory material, ballot text, etc. I think it's important to note that with the charter now just months away from being 100 years old, it's never had a comprehensive updating or amendment. There have certainly been a few issues over the 100 years that were addressed by the charter. Adoption of police and fire civil service, adoption of civilian civil service, and some items like that, going from 2 commissioners to 4. But truly, for the age of the document, it stood the test of time. We're now kind of to the point, though, that many of the things contained in that charter have been superseded by other items. So the majority of what you've got to talk about today really are kind of housekeeping type items, and then a couple that are certainly of more substance. If you would, could return to tab 2. Mayor and Commission, the other thing that we've done is Marcus has distilled the 22 potential amendments into kind of a bullet list that we can display in your chambers today when that item is called. And then there's backup for each one, more detailed. But I think that's a pretty major event. We just don't do this in Amarillo. So the chance to do it now and certainly to show folks what's up.
Is it appropriate to ask Mr. Norris to go through his bullet points for us?
During the meeting,
Yeah.
I think that would be a good idea.
Out there.
Out there.
Can I ask a question? Because I'm still having trouble with it. I guess it's showing my age
Maturity.
and teaching an old dog new tricks. Once again, tell me why the reason, the thinking behind going from city commission to city council. And therefore, we would be councilmen, and I guess
Council members.
council person.
Council members.
It's the generic term, council member.
Gender.
Of course, as it should be, as opposed to the old way of city commission.
It's just a matter of updating the modern terminology. Most home rule cities today, you have city councils. It helps distinguish you from county commissions, which by Texas Constitution must be called commissioners court and commissioners. I saw a faux pas in the newspaper just this weekend where they talked about the county judge dealing with the city commission. Well, it's not the city commission, it's the county commission that the county judge must deal with. Even within our own building here, we have others who bear the title commission, planning and zoning commission. That comes out of state law. We don't have any choice over that. We do have choice over a few others, Parks Commission, Traffic Commission. We'll be bringing forward recommendations later about a name change for some of those. Again, to further distinguish this governing body for the city being the city council. If it remains city commission, we can certainly, it's not the end of the world, it's just an opportunity to update. It may be eliminate a little confusion. That's the reason.
I mean, it's not causing any heartburn or sleepless nights. You know, I'm sure there's some out there that we call it, Little War Club.
We occasionally will even encounter a vendor from out of town or a federal agency. I've had to explain to the Department of Justice more than once. They say, now what's the city commission? I said, that's our governing body. Oh, you mean like a city council? Yeah, exactly like a city council.
The same, only different.
I do that all the time. I say, if you're at something in downstate, city commissioner, they look at me and they go, city council.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think it's
So city council is used
nearly
evidently
everywhere.
much more.
Yeah, everywhere. They don't
Yeah.
understand what a
Almost
city commissioner
unanimously,
is.
Jim.
Yeah, I should do it.
But counties use commissioners, cities use council.
The counties have to use commissioners.
So I'd rather be distinguished as
There are
council.
only 2 commissions in Texas.
I was just going to say that, well, the commission today is usually indicative of some place like Santa Ana, Texas. That's a tiny place that still has a true commission form of government. And we've long eclipsed that.
Yeah,
So
super. Go for it. I really like Proposition 1.
Good discussion then, Proposition 1. This is updating titles, names, et cetera, to reflect current day.
Oh, one other question while we're there. It had said in some of the language on setting up this election that you will have some explanation of these propositions on the ballot?
no, we're not allowed to do that because that would be deemed politicking. You can't do that within
So it'd
200
be
feet of
just
polling
a-
place.
just
It'll
like
be
it's on-
just
just
like
the
it's
ballot
on.
text.
Okay.
It's what the voters will have. It's not different than what you'll see from the state in November. There will be some state constitutional amendments that will simply say the amendment to do thus and so,
And it's
issue
assessed.
veteran land bonds. If you want to know the full background on that, you'd have to go back and look at some joint resolution that may be several pages long that the legislature passed. That's a standard legislative mode of communication, and we've copied that here. This is what the legislature does, this is the way other cities do it. You place your reasoning and background in the ordinance so it's clear what the intention is, but then your ballot text is required to be much more succinct
Yeah.
and brief. It really does place the burden properly on voters to educate themselves through the news media. We'll be getting this out to the different media outlets for them to use to educate people on the background.
League of Women Voters will publish probably both parts
Great point.
In their voters' guide.
in the voters' guide.
Yeah, we'll make that available to them. We'll make it available to everyone in electronic format where it's easy for them to incorporate. Good question, Commissioner. Thank you for pointing out that the ballot text will be fairly bare bones as the law requires.
But it would be pretty close to what's right here.
It's exactly what, you are approving the ballot text
Okay.
in this ordinance. That's why it's set out separately.
Okay, I'm good with all of that.
Prop 2 is taking care of your initial charter, of course, was being adopted and adopted for the first time. So there are provisions in the charter that are solely dedicated to the implementation of the charter. The charter was fully implemented by 1915. This is also housekeeping. Let's take those items out. Prop 3 references to specific state laws. The state laws in 1913 look dramatically different than they do today. Not to mention that the new ones, of course, but over time, existing laws from 1913 have been recodified, moved into different sections, etc. So this would take out those references and in each case just replace it, say, the applicable state law as amended, thus giving you language that lives rather than stands on a single point in time. Questions on 3? Proposition 4 addresses annexations. The annexation policy of the city was written into the charter in 1913, a period of time in which there was very little state law. As you know well, now there's extremely prescriptive state law, and state law always is going to trump our charter when they're in conflict. So this just says annexations will be conducted in accordance with state law. You have to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Whether we change the charter or not, we have to do it that way.
Yeah, more reflect what we actually have to do.
Yeah. All right, the next item, pretty interesting to me, and I don't know that I caught this until Marcus did all of his work. The charter prescribed what was in effect a very early form of the State Open Meetings Act when there was no State Open Meetings Act. There is now. It's also a very prescriptive body of law. Of course, we follow that and have followed it since it was adopted. This would align your charter such to say that you'll act in accordance with the Open Meetings Act. Again, you're going to do that regardless, so another opportunity to do some housekeeping. Number 6, municipal court number of judges. The charter established a single city judge. That was fine for a period of time in which you had 9,000 residents in your city. Now that you're approaching 200, we can't do it with one, and we have not done it with one judge. So this is setting up the authority and the charter rights to let the city commission, city council, if successful, decide the number of judges. Court fines. Court fines were established in 1913 at $200 out of your municipal court, which actually was a significant amount of money. Yeah, it was pretty punitive. Very punitive for that day and time. But state law is now much higher than that. Is it up to 2,000? Yeah, up to 2,000
For certain offenses.
This aligns your charter back with state law. Says that you'll do what's in the state law, or lacking that, what's in your ordinances.
Brings up a question, for instance, because we talked about it, and I can't remember what restricted us, and that was like, and I'm relatively sure that it was on handheld cell phone, handheld devices, that the maximum that could be fined was $200, because I was thinking, if you're gonna give it some teeth, make it 5,000. And was that not being restricted by our own charter?
That particular restriction is in state law. On a traffic violation, we're capped at 250. 250 was the number.
Oh, okay.
The $2,000 is for other types of offenses, health and safety, fire code violations. There's 3 types of violations. Traffic violations capped by state law at 250. Health safety violations are capped at 2,000. Criminal offenses such as shoplifting, those fall in the gap between 250 and littering, truancy, assault. Those are the ones that fall between that 250
And 2,000.
So the one for fireworks is also a state set maximum that's higher than
We
our
could go
law.
to 2,000 on
It's
that.
higher than our law. Okay,
So, because you're getting into the health and safety issues.
That's right, fire safety.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Proposition 8, expenditures during emergencies. The current state law, the current city policies allow your manager to authorize expenditures up to $50,000 The charter says that's great, but if you're in an emergency, you may only spend $250. So, seeing as how I've got fire trucks that you can't fill up for $250, possibly request that this be on the ballot to remove that limit and just follow the state law as we do for all other purchases beyond the emergencies.
Yep.
Number 9 is bonds, or commonly referred to as fidelity bond. The charter requires that myself and several others post such bond. The amount was set by charter at $5,000. Would suggest that that amount really ought to be set by the government body. And thus, this proposition would accommodate that. And for the record, they don't let me sign checks anyway, so you're good there, but we've got others to do. Quorum, also an interesting one that Marcus was aware of and I wasn't. Per the charter, only elected members of this body can count towards a quorum. So in the case when you had a appointed person sit on this body, technically, they're not part of your quorum. So this just says that a quorum is all members.
We're serving as a city council member.
11 and 12 both are to align your election dates with, again, state law. Originally, the charter decided when you could hold elections. Since then, that privilege has been taken away, and you have, at least in today's law, 2 choices and 2 choices only. Number 11 is for everything other than electing the city commission, and it says you'll hold those elections in accordance with state law.
I've got a question for Marcus. Well, go ahead, you were going to do 2 together.
And 12 is your regular city election, which per the charter is actually to be held in April, although the election code says no, you may not. So May 1st, odd number, the nearest date to May 1st, odd number years.
So many of these are following Texas law. So if it follows Texas law, why is it necessary to have it in our charter as well?
Well, that's a great question. If you really want to get radical, you really want to get radical,
Yeah, well,
That's
I don't,
her.
I'm just asking a
That's her.
question.
You know, keep Austin weird,
you
keep
could,
her radical.
you could write the
Keep
city
going radical.
charter on a sheet of paper no bigger than that. As a home rule city, the city of Amarillo shall have all powers, rights, and privileges under the Texas Constitution and not otherwise abridged by general law of the state. Period, signed here. In 1913, the home rule movement was so new, everyone was concerned. They wanted to make sure their home rule city was fully vested with all the powers that a home rule city ought to have, but no one was quite sure what that was. So you have all these long lists. From 1913 to the mid-50s, that was the way the 5-4 was. Beginning in the 50s, Texas Supreme Court began issuing decisions, and the legislature, in passing various laws, tipped the hat saying, well, unless you're a home rule city. And slowly we began to understand the Constitution really meant what it said when it said a home rule city has full powers of self-governance. And so today that principle and those laws are so well established. It's funny you would ask that because a city attorney downstate and I were talking the other day, and he said, what's going on up here? I said, we may amend our charter. He said, are you going to go the really short route? I said, no, I'm not brave enough to propose that. But it's now a well-accepted principle that a home rule city has all powers and duties that are not otherwise prohibited by state law or the Constitution. And that could be your charter. So, in answer to your question, to some extent, what we're trying to do here is just keep riding the horse. We're going to, our charter references state law, we're just going to update that reference to state law. We're not going to shoot the horse. We'll keep riding that and not take a real radical change.
It's helpful to me to be able to go back and see propositions and kind of understand, because it's kind of a shortcut. Otherwise, you have to
It
go
would be
back to
very
the whole
difficult and
Texas law.
time-consuming for our citizens to go review state law as opposed to our
Well,
city
and
charter.
that is, again, the practical problem. Even my legal staff when I ask them a charter question, I say, what does our charter hold on this? They've got to get the little booklet out, and then they've got to go to the law library to get all the state laws out and court opinions that have, over the years, modified the letter of our charter. The letter of our charter is no longer the letter of the law. For example, there's a reference still in our charter to the phrase tax-paying voters. Well, poll taxes were outlawed back in the 60s. And the fact that you have to own property was outlawed in the 60s. But there it is, it's still in our charter. If you read that, and some citizens do this, we get several calls a year where someone calls and says, the charter says you got to be a tax-paying voter in the city. And we have to do a brief civics lecture and remind them that no, their civil rights movement came along in the 60s. There have been federal laws that have far eclipsed.
This shows you my age. I still have a poll tax receipt. The last ones that were issued.
Wow.
Was right after we moved in, no, in 62.
I have my grandparents' poll tax receipts.
I have my own.
So by updating these references,
Kicks me off when I look at them.
Yes.
by updating these references to state laws and making them a little more generic, hopefully our charter will stay more up to date in the future. Great question. That's really part of what spurred this whole effort. Back in 2008, Mayor McCart was concerned when she was trying to read the charter and saying, but the charter says, and I was saying, but federal law now says, and that trumps the charter.
I'd rather have it all spelled out.
And she said, why don't we
Yeah,
spell
it's
it
a
all
shortcut.
out? Exactly. And so her, and at that time, City Manager Alan Taylor had me write that original kind of wish list. If we were going to make changes, what would they be?
Okay.
Well, let's continue with Proposition 13. This is an interesting situation that we have not faced in Amarillo, but some other cities have, and that is when you have petitions circulated and charter amendments are on the ballot, and you have two different groups in the city propose conflicting amendments, and lo and behold, each one gets a majority favorable vote. Which one becomes the law? This would be a tiebreaker, if you will, providing that the one that receives the highest number of positive votes, affirmative votes, would prevail. 14 is the same situation. Instead of charter amendments, though, it just refers generally to any kind of ordinance proposed by initiative or referendum. If you have competing initiatives or referendums and they both individually pass, which one becomes law? If you cannot reconcile them, then the one with the highest number of favorable votes.
Most marbles.
Ma'am?
Makes whoever has the most marbles.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's 13 and 14. 15, this is one of the ones the manager mentioned that while many of these up to now have been housekeeping, this one is a substantive change. This would place a time limit for the circulation of petitions for initiative or referendum. Traditionally, initiative and referendum are viewed as extraordinary remedies for extraordinary situations where the public across the city is concerned about a matter. If it's a matter of great public concern, it stands to reason it ought to be easy to go out and gather signatures if there's wide public concern about a matter. And we're on number 15 actually. And so if that premise is true, that initiative and referendum are for matters of broad community concern, then it'll be fairly easy to go out and in about, this says 90 days, gather those required signatures and turn it back in. It keeps the political process moving so that you don't have a quagmire of issues in the community. Other cities, I saw varying numbers. You're right in the middle of the pack. Some had as little as 60 days. The longest one I saw was 180. There were several in the 90 to 100, 120 day range. So you're right in the middle of the pack if you choose to go this way. Number 16, you have to read the charter very carefully, but it's there. You read carefully where it explains that the city secretary has a reasonable time to validate signatures before there's any duty to pass the petition to the city commission. It's such an important step. We feel like it's worth spelling out a specific time period and having it very clear to avoid disputes. And we proposed 21 calendar days. Question about that one? Number 17 sets a 3-year waiting period. Once a petition has gone to the ballot and the voters have voted yes or no to something, this proposition would say you've got to wait 3 years before you do another petition and bring that back to the voters. Not you, the commission, but a citizen's initiative of a referendum.
Who gets to define that it's generally the same petition versus just a few word changes?
My successor.
Okay.
Yeah, whoever is filling these chairs at that time, that will be for them to decide.
Filling these chairs or that chair?
All the chairs.
See where Jared's one?
I'll just take my chair and leave now. I can see where that's heading.
I've got a whole stack of those chairs.
You know, Mayor, some of these things will just have to be left for future generations to sort out. Number 18, the charter requires you to meet weekly and allows no possibility of cancellation, and yet the reality of life is there are needs to cancel. You have canceled meetings for holidays, for exigent circumstances like a blizzard, and rather than leave all of us with that queasy feeling in our stomach, then the charter ought to allow you as adults to decide when you need to cancel a meeting. And, yeah, I feel queasy when we cancel one. You may not. You don't. I feel it. I feel it over here. Yeah, in this chair. Questions on that one?
We're still requiring 2 meetings a month.
Still requiring 2 a month.
That's fine.
You know, we thought about just leaving it blank and just saying you may cancel meetings for exigent circumstances. Y'all are reasonable people, but you can't always presume upon that. We've seen instances in some panhandle towns and cities where a small minority or a mayor just starts canceling meetings for no good cause other than a personal grievance. And we didn't want to set up a cavalier situation like that, so we kept in the requirement of at least 2 meetings a month. Unless there's a disaster declaration, if it's that big of a problem, everybody's going to understand it'll be legitimate.
Who cancels or calls a meeting? Is it mayor and city manager, or just city manager?
Mayor and manager, in theory, a majority of the commission could
To
decide.
get together, that's putting stuff on the agenda.
And I say if we trust our city manager, which we should do, then he should know whether we need to cancel a meeting or not without
I
us.
think it's his call.
But he's always asked, I mean, they've always asked, or at least informed. So it's easy. It's common sense and horse sense.
Number 19 is another one of those substantive changes that the manager alluded to a few minutes ago. This would add the requirement that for a person to be a candidate for mayor or city commissioner, they would need to pay a filing fee of $100, or in lieu of paying that fee, submit a signature of 100, a petition of 100 signatures in support of their candidacy.
Registered voters.
Of registered voters within the city. And that's not, you're not plowing new ground there. We could roll out many examples in Texas cities who have that. You don't run for state office without filing with the Texas Secretary of State and paying a 4-digit or 5-digit filing fee. You don't run for national office without paying a 6-digit filing fee. You're not plowing new ground there. Well, you are for Amarillo, but in a legal sense you're not.
You'd have to submit that by the filing deadline, and then they would, and then I guess Francis or the city secretary would.
Validate those signatures. It's just 100, it won't take but just a day to do that. Number 20, your current civil service provision in the charter says that all city employees have civil service protection, except, and it has a short list of several individuals and groups of employees. This would expand that list of exempted positions in 2 ways. Currently, it says that an assistant department head is exempt from civil service. With the growth in city government, 24/7 operations, many departments have more than an assistant department head. They have several assistant department heads. This would take out, yes, that's right, several examples. This would remove the or an or a assistant department head. It would just say all department heads. It would also add licensed professionals such as attorneys, architects, engineers, doctors, nurses, to be exempt from civil service. If we have a problem with one of those professionals, we want to have the flexibility to deal with it quickly, promptly, however the manager sees fit in that situation with that professional. In a sense, they're held to a higher standard, and so there's a higher consequence. They should be employed at will, is the thrust of this proposition.
Next one, 21, the electronic notices. We've had a little bit of discussion about that. I might offer just a little more comment. I thought quite in depth about this one. It's my thought that certainly I don't feel this hurts or damages anything at all. I just don't know that until the state starts changing their laws that there's much benefit to be gained. In other words, we would be ahead of the state waiting for their actions, because so much of what we do per state law has to be published. I mean, when they say published, they mean take out an ad in the paper.
How do they choose the paper versus?
It's actually defined, and I may not say it exactly correct, but it's a newspaper of general circulation published in the county in which the city resides.
Or the
It's
next,
defined.
the next nearest one. There is a definition.
They've had some legislation lines and electronic.
They've begun to. They're small steps, and I agree with the sheriff that we would be leaping ahead, but it's coming. Every session, the legislature, right now, they're generally making it as an alternative. You shall publish and place on your website. And it's just a matter of time until I think they've dropped that publication.
So you say to eliminate this or leave it?
I eliminate it. I
Pardon me?
think we're ahead of them. I would eliminate
You would or would not?
21?
it. Yes.
Yes, what, would or would not? Okay.
Well, I would, if this happens, I would still urge us to do both, even though we could.
Well, we will in many cases,
Yeah.
won't we? Because state law will still require.
We do right now, most of what we do.
I think it gives sort of a false indication we're going to stop doing that. And it's already confusing enough where those notices are. I just leave it the way it is because we are ahead of the game.
So scratch 21?
I'd scratch 21. I mean, it's y'all's purview.
Okay.
The juice may not be worth the squeeze there.
Well, I just want to make sure everybody gets
Since they were
notified.
would.
They will. I mean,
May.
it's like our meetings.
May.
They get notified if they want to.
Well, that we do our best.
We do our best. That's exactly right. We do what's proper. And we do what's best.
It does say may, it doesn't say have to.
No, because there might be cases where state law won't let us, as there, Marcus?
There's many of those, there's more of those today than not.
That's right. It's still the norm.
Leave it alone.
What do you think, Lily?
I didn't say we had to, and it'll eventually come, but whatever everybody wants to do. I just wonder why.
Well, this is just a work session. Y'all can think about the next few hours and discuss it again out there before you have to decide.
We actually have, oh, is there a second on this?
There is a second.
Next week?
Yes, it's an ordinance,
So it's,
2 readings.
this is the first reading, second reading next week, then the ballot set.
Then you're done.
Okay. So we're clear.
22 is the last proposition, and it is another substantive change. Currently, the requirement of signatures for petitions are 25% of the voters voting in the last regular city election. If this were approved, this would change it to 5% of registered voters.
I think this is important because it does not allow people to artificially try and manipulate our democratic system. And it establishes a number based on the number of registered voters. If somebody feels it's important to register to vote, they've made that choice. It's still their choice whether they vote in a specific election. But for somebody, a group, as we experienced, to report low voter turnouts, that they can lower a number is just not democratic. Everybody I've bounced this off, I think this is nothing more than fair.
This is a much more stable target, too.
Yeah, and it's also achievable. It's not, you know, if you'd have put, there's some cities that have 25% of the registered voters for this. 25% of the registered voters. 5% is pretty equivalent to what it was if you had last election and looked at the numbers. That's pretty equivalent. Last election was no great turnout. We did it based on the turnout when there was an issue like a smoking issue. This is actually lower than what was required after that. So I think I'd leave it in. I know we've discussed it, but I'd leave it in.
It's steady, you're right.
It can't be manipulated by somebody's whim to subvert the democratic process. And that's the important part to me.
And I think if you can get 5% of the registered voters to sign a petition, we need to go to the polls.
You dang right we do. And we need, I mean, we're offering something that's very reasonable when other cities are requiring a whole lot more. So my vote is to leave that in.
Yeah, I ain't problem with it.
Okay.
All right, any questions on this ordinance? Again, this does order and set the election today in your regular meeting, and you get ready to consider this on first reading. If there's any changes versus what's published or what's posted, this is the time to do that. And then again, the following Tuesday, so the 20th.
Well, it says the ordinance takes 22 amendments, so if we decide to take that out, it'd be 21.
Correct.
Do you just lower the numbers to keep it plain? What happened to that one?
We just tell the truth, we just
Gotcha.
lay it out there.
Well, I'd like to point out that this is an excellent time to be doing this because of the 100th year anniversary and because it needed to be done. And we may get some feedback on some of these amendments, but you know what? The voters are going to decide
Each one?
whether these changes take place or not. We are just making recommendations
Each one.
on what those changes might be, and the voters will ultimately make that decision.
Point out one housekeeping matter at the very bottom of that last page of that petition. It mentions two attachments, an interlocal agreement with Potter County and an interlocal agreement with Window County. You've seen those before. I don't have it on here. It didn't make the press deadline. We're waiting for our partners, Potter County and Window County, to get back with us. This will have the list of polling places. It will have allocate the costs shown for the elections. The counties will be conducting the state constitutional amendment elections. And I apologize if that's not here, but we will have that for your final reading. It's those housekeeping provisions for administering the election.
Margaret, would you comment on the changes that have been made in one county and not the other yet about polling places? Is there any effect on our city charter? No?
Not directly, no, not whatsoever. It's just that we have, our city is in two different counties.
Right.
And one county so far is maintaining the traditional approach of having a designated early voting place and, of course, on election day, your precincts. As I understand, the other county is using a more modern technique called a voting center or election center, which doesn't matter what precinct you live in. You can go to one of these centers, show them your card. They've got the whole menu of ballots available. They will give you the correct vote, and you can vote at one of these election centers.
On voting day, will they maintain about the same number as they did or were they?
I'm not sure of that, Mayor.
They indicate
On
that.
voting day, on election day.
I do not know. I thought
think
the
it's
election
still-
center was
Yeah.
the come one, come all deal.
Yeah.
Well, but
It
I
is
thought
that
this-
for early voting.
Yeah.
I don't know on election day. We'll have to see.
We'll find out.
Because it seems to me, not changing everything at once, just let them go in. I've been at polls and seen people go in and say, oh, they changed my poll again. And that's not always true, but that's their perception. Because they voted in a federal election, it was in a different place, and it's just a mess. Simple.
That does not encourage good voter participation. There's more and more difficulties in staffing the various precincts. And when some of the precincts have very low voter turnout, how do you properly aggregate or combine the election center idea? If it's carried to its logical conclusion, really, I think, has got to help the voter. Today's the day to vote. Go vote. You don't have to, okay, now if it's federal, I'm over here, but when it's a county, I'm over, you know.
It's confusing.
It is confusing.
It's not meant to
And-
encourage
They'll have the
voting.
college ballots, the school ballots, the city ballots, it's all in one place. Oh, you don't live in the city, you don't get the city ballot. It's a very nice system.
Well,
But
and
is-
Ellen had an experience with that.
I had to, it took me 2 hours to vote here because they didn't let me vote in the city commission race, because they got me confused with where I live, and I wouldn't leave until they let me vote.
They gave her the right ballot, gave her a
A
provisional.
little peaceful
They had to
civil
call us-
disobedience.
Yeah.
They gave her a provisional that
They
said,
had to call a state, I think.
when you swore that you would not
Yeah, I had
vote
to
twice
swear.
on those things.
Yeah, that was, because I'd already
Provisional
voted in
ballot.
one, so I had to then swear that I wouldn't have a second vote.
The other one I witnessed that was so strange is River Road. They walk in one door and they're coming out and going in another. I said, what are they doing? They said, well, that's for the something election, and they have to come out and go in this other door to vote on the other machines for the other election.
Crazy.
And I said, what?
But
They
what
said,
was,
yeah.
are the voting centers though in easy to get to places? Because the idea, I guess, of a
That's
precinct
my
is you can walk there.
I don't have those addresses yet, Commissioner.
I hope
We're
that
waiting for
They
Randall
have to
County.
be, they have to be approved.
You'll see
Yes,
them.
they'll be accessible.
Okay.
I think we ought to talk to them about this, go to your local nearest to and vote.
It used to be the fire
Every
station
Saturday.
when I was.
Every Saturday.
Every Saturday.
Or that bank that's on every corner.
And
I
vote,
don't know.
vote twice.
It was a fire station when we were kids. We went to get elected and we went to get a license on our bicycle.
Mm.
That's when we went there.
In a lot of places, that's where you get your dog registrations.
I used to beg my parents, but you have to beg them hard. But I heard it's election day because it's going to be at the fire station. I want to go sit on that fence while they wait in line.
Oh, and the firemen get us all in front of the deal and then turn on the siren and surprise us and we jump through. That was great. Let's
When I
go.
found out that I didn't get to vote, I whirled around and I said,
Tell you what, Mayor,
1:30 work.
if there's no questions relative to the ordinance.
We would be able to visit this, can we bring this back up if Brian has some concerns? Maybe the couple that were
He has
concerned.
checked in, and we expect him about 1:15 or so.
Okay, great.
So he's working to get here.
All right.
Um,
You wanna go next?
Ordinance number 3, or item number 3, 4, 5, and 6, these are the first readings of the next set of bids. Number 3 is specifically the Brennan Boulevard bid. That's the small one that kind of connects Sleepy Hollow back over to 34th. Kathleen is here again with us. Kelly having abandoned the title of pit master.
Does that make her pit mistress?
The pit mistress. And I'm not sure if that's
This
proper.
doesn't sound good.
That doesn't sound good? Never mind, we didn't really call you that on
How about the
tape.
queen of kids?
The queen's of the
Yeah.
I'd make some jokes off that too, so maybe we ought to just move along. If
I like
you'll flip
pit
to the
master.
sideways spreadsheet. 5-year plan. We'll let Kathleen run us down that column real quick, and we'll just move through these as quickly as we can today.
Sure.
Kathleen?
This is the Brennan Public Improvement District, and they are going to have a beginning fund balance of $7,737. And they are anticipating to spend $17,351. Their assessments this year, we're proposing, they keep their assessments as, with no change in this year's assessments, and so we're proposing $14,084. We have met with this public improvement district and discussed maybe dissolving this public improvement district because of the minimum improvements that are out there. That, you know, it's just a median, and so we have met with the homeowners and haven't really had too much of a drawback for that. So hopefully, maybe this time next year, we won't have this public improvement district.
Well, they have to, I mean, it's not, oh, I see what you're saying, for this year, so it's all.
And-
So they will have assessments for this year, correct?
And they're steadily spending that PID balance down, which we're fine with until the ultimate outcome is determined.
But you got a negative ending fund balance after
Well, not,
14, 15.
yeah, it's beginning in
So
the,
you'll end it somewhere in here, hopefully.
questions on Brennan? Item number 4, this is the Greenways. And we have a new Greenways representative. What,
So the
1,
Greenways
2,
is,
3, Lelia, would you walk us through, serve as the mayor until we finish this item?
Oh, sure. Okay, Greenways.
He's got it.
I can't.
Lilia's gonna handle this item, the mayor, are you gonna recuse?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, let's see, got it.
All right,
Okay.
Kathleen?
well, this property is located between Hillside, Swansea, Arden, and Coulter Streets. It's within the southwest portion of Amarillo. Currently, there's 800 lots out in this public improvement district, and improvements include green spaces or linear parks, water features, and entry signs. The PID board did meet, and they have requested or recommended increasing assessments by $40 per each lot. And I have had several phone calls and several emails regarding the assessments increase, and Kelly suggested that I maybe let you look over the emails that I have. I do have a summary of those, but if you want to go ahead and pass one around. The board met on July 3rd, and then the homeowners association and a PID board representative, the developer, and myself met on July 15th to go over the proposed budget and service plan. And so we mailed property owner notices on August 2nd. So that gave them about a 15-day notice for their homeowners association to notify their residents of the increase. I did have about 8 properties that commented that they were, they really didn't appreciate or they don't recommend we go ahead and increase the assessment by $40. However, in looking at the budget, we do need to increase that due to the amount of water they are spending. And then also, we're proposing that there be a bond issued for this next year. So, if you look at your 5-year service plan, the 2013-2014 year, we're proposing that the total expenditures to be $469,577, and our assessments with the 7% increase is going to equal $474,973. So if we didn't increase assessments, we wouldn't break even this year.
And their fund balance is very low. They really need to increase their assessments. Water has been a significant increase over the last several years.
So, you all remind me, do all these PIDs have a governing body? And,
All except Brennan, yes.
okay, and so the governing body votes on whether they're gonna do this or not? And if I buy a home in, like, let's just say the Greenways, do I agree somewhere that I'm going to go by
Yes.
the,
In your closing documents,
in your closing documents, it says I'm gonna go by whatever the governing body says?
that you are within a public improvement district and that there are fees associated with the public improvement district's maintenance.
And so their argument is really with their governing body, not with the city. Is that right?
Or it should be.
Okay.
Or they think that we should intercede.
Is Lilia the
Yes.
mayor, so hand it to her for that.
Now, I've also submitted these comments to the Greenways HOA manager, Lisa Watley, and that was per the developer's request. So the homeowners association is aware of these comments as well. I did have several comments or concerns as to whether the park that is located within this public improvement district is maintained with PID money, and it is not. The public park is not maintained with PID money, it's maintained with city money. So the linear parks within, if you look at the sketch, there's a couple of longer areas that are just the linear park system, and those are what the fees are going towards.
And I would imagine there are a lot of things like the streets, for instance, and greenways that are maintained by the city and not by the PID. Okay.
And the proposed bond issue would be contingent on additional lots being developed through December 31, so that the revenue generated from those new lots would cover the bond issue. So we'll wait until January to see. where
We do
are.
have those lots in for review,
Good,
so we're
good.
hoping that those will be approved.
So,
Go ahead.
on the time that I've been on the city future council commission, this is the first time I've seen so much mail on one of these bids. Is this the first time we've had this kind of?
Not for this bid.
discourse?
This is not uncommon for this bid.
And do you happen to have knowledge of whether or not they met and the governing body met in public in what was a homeowner, where the homeowners were invited to come? Do you know how that
I
process
am not
worked?
aware of that.
But you were at the PID meeting.
I was at the PID meeting, and I also attended the homeowners association meeting. So it had the homeowners association board there. I'm not aware of whether the board then met with the homeowners as a collective group to discuss this, whether they had a meeting that was called and anybody that lives within this neighborhood could have attended.
Yeah, my question is, did the neighborhood have a public forum?
Not that I'm aware of.
Well, that's not our responsibility.
I know, I'm
when I
just
see it.
wondering. I'm just wondering.
You know, and we do this as a courtesy to make sure that things work well, right, Vicki? And so if we weren't housing the PIDs, I guess they would be handling their own affairs and we would never hear about it other than, you know, they'd have to pay their taxes or they'd have to contact us for any improvements and such. So really, I don't think we can force their board to do anything because they are their own autonomous body. And so if the governing body for the PIDs doesn't contact the homeowners and the homeowners don't go to meetings, I don't know what we can do about that.
You do have the power of veto under state law, that's why it's on your agenda.
Okay.
And if you become convinced that a kid is being mismanaged, there's serious concerns, well, you're not required to approve there. You can shut it down.
I have a general PID question. Do you have to follow the bylaws or whatever that PID is to make that determination? So if you knew the bylaws and it said I have to have a meeting with the homeowners, how do we discern that, or don't we?
Well, that does become a problem there, because of micromanagement.
Yeah.
They do have a set of organizing documents, which the governing body must approve, that the PID will be set up in this way and operate in this way. And they're then required to submit their stuff to you each year as these advisory boards. And I just want to point out to you that you do have the power of veto if you become convinced that there are
Well, that's one of the reasons why we have the bid mistress, to guide her on this and advise us. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like since I have been on the city council, we didn't charge the PID anything for doing their bookkeeping, doing their assessments, doing their collections. And now we get a reasonable fee, as we should.
And that PID meeting, and I might have heard the question wrong, that was a public meeting. The PID board meeting was a public meeting.
And the homeowners that lived in that area were invited to that?
Well,
About
not
that
specific, we
somehow.
didn't, we
It was
wouldn't have sent a.
posted
yes.
through the 72-hour notice through the Open Meetings Act. So we,
They're also mailed out at some point in this process.
There is.
the 2nd of August, it was mailed out. The PID board was recommending that this increase be.
Which is what would probably generate the correspondence.
Fees.
And state law requires us to notify property owners of council members, council meetings, and what the assessments are on an annual basis. And so that's what the purpose of the mail out is for.
One other quick question. If I'm a homeowner in one of these areas, do I have a way of knowing who my PID board is? Specifically who they are?
That would probably vary from PID to PID as to how large it is and how it's set up. I can't answer that. We have to go back to each one.
I do know that their HOA has a list of their PID board members. So if you contact your HOA, then you have.
Would it be possible to set this one aside for the future, or are we under a time frame on this one, on all these PIDs, to approve them or not, or so that we can feel comfortable about our decision on whether to approve their budgets or not?
We need to check, this pit is in Randall County, and the calendar that you were on for considering the pits is actually set by Randall County. Might suggest that you consider the PID today, because it's not done today. Today is first read only. And let us see if we can answer that question. These are not taxes, they're fees,
PID fees.
but, you know, they act like, look like, quack like a tax. They come through the Randall County tax assessor, collector, et cetera. So let us see what that answer is.
Well, I just perused these very rapidly, but it seems like that you have answered their questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I don't see any reason to set it aside.
Kathleen works, I mean, because city staff is still doing is doing this, so she and Laura Hastings and Clint's daughter prepared these budgets and presented them first to the developer and then to the PID board. So in the main increase in this budget is their water budget is extremely high.
And I don't have any question about the amount of the PID. What I'm concerned about is that the city get with these homeowners that are complaining a black eye when the city doesn't deserve it. When really the PID board needs to do their job.
The city gets the black eye.
Yeah.
But you're exactly right. The board's supposed to be dealing fairly with its resident members.
Yeah.
The HOA has a seat on the PID board. They should be doing right by their members. In some cities, they charge a higher administrative fee, and for that, the city then mails a postcard to the property owners. In addition, saying there will be a PID board meeting at the swimming pool at 4 p.m. Tuesday.
Bring your own beer.
And that makes me nervous.
And it makes you nervous because we all miss somebody?
Yeah, in any individual notice situation, I think you run that risk of being challenged.
Where you notify
You have to rely on the
resident.
most recent tax roll and let it go. If property has switched hands recently, pushing the address of the occupant.
Kathleen says that members of the PID board will be here today. Right?
They've been invited.
And usually a representative from the developer is here as well when we look at their budgets.
Okay.
Now, one other comment that I would like to make on this one is, hopefully this is going to be their last increase for quite a while. We have placed a $0 increase in there for the next several years, so maybe we won't hear from them next year if we don't increase their assessments.
Well, and they've got about 800, residential lots, and certainly there's a few, not unusual. This group.
So when this comes up, because Paul can't speak, Lily's going to be the mayor?
I'll just hand it to her.
I believe that Brian is actually the mayor pro tem right now,
Okay.
but,
Yeah.
so we're at pro
He's not
tem
here right now.
10.
Okay, got it. Oh, we're pro tem 10, that's what we're doing.
I'm not sure that that's a legally correct term.
We got
We're
it.
in 10-10,
Pro
pro
tem
tem 10.
emeritus or something.
You'll be doing
Do I
that
need to
anyway.
leave the dais or do I
That's
stay?
Oh, good.
Stay up there and be quiet?
Okay, item number 5, this is your Quail Creek Public Improvement District, and this is a relatively new, small one. One cul-de-sac street that comes back. This group handles lots of things on their own. You can see that reflected in their proposed budget.
It's pretty flat.
Pretty flat budget.
Oh, yes. They have 29 lots that are surrounded by Cedar Meadow Circle, and their improvements consist of a landscaped island, walking path, and greenery. They plan to place a picnic table within their landscape area, so that's going to be a little bit of where their budget items are going to go. But have a pretty standard set of expenses. So this year, we're proposing that they have $6,953 worth of expenses, and they're gonna bring in $6,873 worth of revenue. We are recommending, or the advisory board recommends, to keep the property assessments at $237 per lot.
Item number 6 is the Vineyards. Vineyards is the neighborhood up here just immediately northwest at the corner of Broadway and Hastings, over by your West Rogers Golf Complex.
Those aren't very big. $50.
They have the one boulevard in?
They have
Is
one
that
boulevard in, and it's mainly xeriscape type improvements. They don't have any grass that's being maintained, any trees and shrubbery. There's 66 lots that are platted, and they're proposing to have assessments this year as $50. The developer is on the board, and their board has recommended to keep that at a $50 assessment rate.
Can the developer stay on the board after it's filled, or does he have to step up?
There's a point at which I think right now the developer has all 3 seats.
Yeah, but once it develops,
There's a portion in the petition that states where, at what time those members become
Okay.
homeowners.
Good. Questions on the Vineyards bid? And that was for just a moment, if you would, ma'am. Number 7, item number 7, this is second and final on the Colonies. Kathleen, any changes at the Colonies?
No, sir?
Mayor and Commission? Item 8, second and final for Point West.
No.
Mayor and Commission? Item number 9, second and final of the Redstone.
No changes there either.
Item number 10, please note this says this is the first reading. This is actually the second and final of your Tutbury bid. The agendas have all been,
Marcus
I know who's been reading those agendas.
Marcus had mentioned that during the commission, it was noted the Tutbury, can you help me with that one, Marcus? The way that the language is stated for Tutbury?
Oh, it had board of directors instead of advisory.
Okay, but we can get that.
We corrected that.
Okay, great.
That was in the text of the ordinance. Okay.
That's right. It was actually on another one that had once we started looking for that.
So that's second final, Mayor, you know that.
Oh, there it is, like on number 6. Let's see, what's the last line, number 6? The district board of directors. It's not, these are advisory boards, they're not board of
Well,
directors.
it's the same on 4 and 5.
so what should I,
It is, again, by statute,
what should I read?
board,
Take out district board,
just say board.
probably improvement director.
Greenways.
Or board.
Just take out, just say board.
District,
Just strike of directors.
Of directors, yeah, just say board.
gotcha.
But by, the statute refers to it as an advisory board, and we refer to it as advisory board in the formation documents.
Down on number 10, it's second and
Mhm.
final. Is that it?
Number 10 is second final.
Yes, that must be. If not, we're heading towards third and final.
One second.
Please, 2 twice is enough.
Yes, sir. See, what, Mayor, if you would like, let's kind of hold on to item number 11. I expect Commissioner Reeves to arrive here shortly. We'll jump to item 12, Water Development Board application for financial assistance. I tried to explain this in the memo. This is a good thing. This is basically retracting the application that we did earlier this year where we asked for design-only money for 2 projects. You approved that, we turned it in, the Water Development Board, which again is in a large state of flux, They looked at it and said, man, this is great, why don't y'all take the construction money down on one of these projects now? So, we are redoing this, and by doing it, this one application replaces those two priors. And you're getting the design-only money on the Big Lift Station 32 project, and you're getting design and construction for the Georgia Street up to the Austin Park Lift Station project. This is really a good thing. It just kind of developed in a circuitous manner once it got to
How
Austin.
many cities get offered these opportunities?
I'm not aware, I know that we fought for everything we've gotten from them before this. We think they just like Floyd so much that if they get all this done and get him out of their hair, we're in good shape.
That's $1 million, isn't it? That's, I mean, 8
8.
million.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, ma'am,
I mean,
8.5.
I read that 3
Well, we
times
get
at
it-
home going, that's.
We get it done in one go-around instead of having to pay
Two
two
different issues.
different issue costs, or the costs of two different issues.
Mhm.
It's good.
Good job, guys.
Just that much more that's also locked in at that favorable rate, whatever that favorable rate happens to be. Consent agenda, consent item A, playground purchase and installation, 2 sets of those.
Yeah.
One at Willow Vista and one at Elwood Park. Both of which are quite needful.
Elwood Park, not playground equipment there.
There is not playground equipment there right now.
Okay,
But
this was,
you see the picture? Cute,
yeah,
different.
yeah, that's what, you'll make a lot of people happy.
Quite different playground equipment in the 2 places.
Breathing apparatus.
I had to look up on Google exactly where the other park was, I'm sorry, but I did.
Willow Vista?
You go down Pavlard, dead end, and you go back to the west, and then you go down another street and go back.
I think Willow Vista, and I'm gonna be wrong if I say this, but I really think Willow Vista is the only one of the school parks we have that is a River Road Independent School District school park.
Okay.
There's your useless school trivia, school park trivia for
This
the
is gonna
day.
look good in Elwood too.
Hmm?
Yeah, it is.
This is gonna look really good in Elwood. Or-
Well, they don't let me play on either one of them, so.
Yeah, I know. Trail on the bridge.
All right, item B, self-contained breathing apparatus. I think we talked about that abbreviation last week. Panhandle Breathing Air Systems, $82,870. This is our annual supply agreement to provide the repair parts that we need. So this is not the bottle. What we talked about the other day was our bottle rotation program. This would be the valve, the gauges, the hoses, the masks, all of the other stuff that goes with the SCBA.
That's a hell of an increase.
That is, and I have a note on here that says why, and I apparently got busy and didn't get that answer. If I had to guess off the top of my head, it's gonna be quantities. With 2007 COs, we were able to upgrade the entire fleet of these, for the lack of a better term. And each firefighter now has their own mask. They don't have their own bottle, but they have their own mask. Vicki,
Yes.
the increase in the SCBA supply agreement, do you know why? Is it quantity doing it?
We can get Curtis to do it.
I got it.
I
Call the chief, just call the chief. We'll get you an answer before we get out of here.
But unit quantities will go above like 20, 25, and they're not high price for each of those, so I don't know what it is.
You can find out.
Remind me of the bottle rotation, how often do we have to do it? Every 3 years, 5 years?
No, it's either 5 or 7. The new bottles are physically are smaller, but they hold more air. They're put in at a higher
PSI.
PSI.
Well, well, if I was
More
in the building,
expensive
I'd want
stuff,
to
I
make
see
sure
there's
my
not.
bottle works.
It's a lot of stuff.
Pages and pages and pages. Item C, this is the text dot grant funding for, or a piece of the grant funding for your city transit system. Did we put a drawing in for item D?
The man's here.
We did. Turn to the page immediately prior to M1, please. M1.
That looks good, I like it.
You like that?
Yeah.
It look good, didn't it?
Thus, item D, this is the architectural services contract with Lavin and Associates. And this is to do the construction and the bidding documents that we will need to move forward with the renovation of that building at 8th and Pierce.
And this is the east entrance.
This is the east entrance. You're standing in the parking lot looking across what would be the alley, what is the alley today. I like it. I really do.
Yeah.
The balcony's not real, it just looks like it.
Good, good. It looks a lot better on the iPad.
It looks better on the iPad. I'm not touching that one.
Me neither.
Item 14, presentation and discussion from representatives of the proposed Amarillo Recreation Complex or park. This is the public-private partnership group that we have heard about. They are, I would imagine at the moment, at the Parks Commission, or maybe we have just completed the Parks Commission. They are going to appear before you today, show some of their materials, explain a little bit about who they are, what they are, and what they would ask the city to do.
And I'd like to move that forward. I understand from a couple of them that they will have a lot of folks here, so I'd like to move it right after the minutes if we could. That's okay with everybody?
You're the chairman.
Okay with me.
Joe, no.
Just tell us.
Gotcha.
Good, because somebody's asking me.
It's 184 pages.
I know.
Let's move it up.
Okay.
And no action is required on that.
No action is required. Would note, though, this is posted as an agenda item, so you'll hear from them. If the body chooses, you'll call for any public, comments, questions, etc. And then you may discuss and deliberate amongst yourselves at a posted item. No action can be taken. You can provide instructions to staff as to what, if any, action you would like to see on a future agenda.
What I'd like to do with this, if it's all right, is recognize them, ask them to speak on behalf of what the proposal is, and then ask for a show of hands if people would like to comment, either for or against, and then we'll decide if we're going to do alternate or just let them get out. We'll do the 3 minutes or less for those commenting.
You're the boss.
Is that okay? I got to see the video this morning, but they have an hour of testimonials.
Okay, item 15. Say what?
The bids docs say it's increasing bid amount due to increased prices, increased age of the SUVs. So higher rate of repairs.
A lot more items.
I couldn't get a hold of the chief, he's out, so.
It was just
I'm
general
out too,
overall.
so I'm hoping somebody
Okay.
will send it.
That's good.
I hope not.
Quantities are high, they're just not a lot of
A
items.
lot of different
We
parts.
can talk
that go
about,
with
that's
it.
all we want, stuff like
I
that.
mean, they're down to O-rings on that. 40 O-rings was the highest number.
The bottles are nearly 4,000 PSI.
As opposed to about 3,000.
1,200, I think, on the steel bottles, the carbon fiber bottles.
Is that the old bottles, the steel bottles?
That's the old bottles.
Well, we think of how recent the 2007 CO was. Well, stuff that was bought in the first year is 5 years old. So, final item on your agenda today is presentation. This is your monthly water use presentation. You are going to be pleasantly surprised and pleased. Now, you won't be surprised you expect, but you'll be pleased.
I want to ask a question y'all might not know, so can I pre-ask it? Do we know average rainfall and where we are now?
No, not annual.
Call Maryville, you're gonna be real close.
I think, because that's what I think, after last night's rain, I think we'll be right there.
We were a half inch.
We were
behind
updating
last
this morning, but I didn't get the final
night.
number.
Gotta be close.
Okay, because I think we're right, we were about half an inch
Half an
short.
inch.
When
sure
you're
last night.
Yeah, and I bet we're right there. Just quote me, Ellen says we're right there. She knows so much.
Maryville knows everything.
Yeah.
Mayor, if we could, we'd go back to item 11 now.
Please.
Item 11 is
Welcome,
the
Dr.
the public hearing and the consideration of the proposed tax rate.
Can we go back, or do you want to go back to the charter deals to cover those two things, or do you want to do that after this?
Well, let's do the charter thing.
I mean, Commissioner Eads, I suggested that we strike the one about the newspaper publishing,
21.
because we're ahead of state law a little bit. We won't be required to write, so we all agreed on that. The further one about petitioning to make the petition tied to voter registration, we wanted to keep it on there as a body, but we certainly want to hear your comments if you have a question about that. Because the idea then is to include people from subverting the democratic process simply by encouraging a lower vote. And we are close to the standard other cities have, although some require as much as 25% of the voter registration, ours is 5%. I know you weren't sure, you were thinking about that one. Do you have any comments?
Oh, I think this is probably not one I would want to put on the list at this time. And I haven't changed my opinion about that. But, like I said many times, we don't have to agree on this thing. Sure. I just think it sends the wrong message at this time. So it's okay.
Well, I think my number was that should this be an issue as strong as like the smoking issue, it would require more signatures than we would be requiring now. If we changed it to 5%, it would actually lower the number that it would have required when the smoking issue came out. So it strikes a balance. It doesn't get exorbitant. It actually, in that case, lowers it. In most cases, it just makes it an even number that can't be falsely manipulated.
Lily had a good point. But I'll let you make it then.
Oh, we're making these recommendations, but ultimately the voters will decide whether they want to change it or not.
True.
So,
Each item will be voted on as a proposition. And the others were pretty much just bringing it up to date with state law, and I don't think you had
We
any
took out
questions.
one, number 21. Didn't we?
Yeah,
So,
we did.
so Brian, we did that.
Mhm.
Eliminated 21.
Do you have any other comments to add to that discussion? I don't. Okay. Thank you. Let's go back then to what you were proposing. Sure. Jared, about the budget.
Item 11. Item 11, this is the first of many steps in the complicated dance to ultimately end up with a city budget about halfway through September. This is the first formal step in doing so. This is the point at which the city commission proposes a maximum tax rate for the 2013-14 budget. You are not adopting the tax rate at this point. This is that exercise where you say, to use my error from last week, I propose a $35 tax rate. And then you can consider anything up to and including that number as we get into your tax rate adoption. You cannot go over that number. So whatever number is selected today, in fact, Michelle will actually step out during the meeting. We're running on a deadline to get it published. The notices that appear in the paper will have this proposed rate. And I think that runs this Thursday. Runs this Thursday.
So anything between that number and what we were prior, any number below that is okay.
That's the high water
Yes.
mark.
The high water mark.
It's the high water mark.
We will have how many discussions about that after today?
Well, you'll have your hearings, which are then separate from your adoptions. Your adoptions are two separate actions. You adopt the budget, then you adopt the tax rate, then you do a second on the budget and a second on the tax rate. And then you do a ratification vote immediately following those votes to say that you voted the way you voted because you voted that way.
Okay, so we'll have at least 2 more discussions, correct?
I would contend you'll have at least 4 more discussions before you.
Okay.
But you are establishing a do not exceed rate in today's. And if I could take a moment, y'all had some excellent questions Thursday, and I've been wrestling with them ever since, trying to figure out, looking at the differentials, where we truly, how do you compare all this stuff between the cities? And with Michelle's help and a lot of her staff, and I don't know that we've yet totally answered that question, but we started running into some stuff yesterday and had an opportunity to graph it and see where we go.
I've seen it.
You seen it? Have you memorized it?
No, sorry, all along.
Here, I'll-
Yes,
I thought we gave him one.
Well, you know, we counted 1.2.
Ooh, this is interesting.
The stacked bar portion of the chart is, as near as we can determine, that portion of the sales tax rate that goes to the city's general fund. So if you look on ours on the left, the difference between the blue and the red, that's half of 1 penny. That make sense?
No, ABC. Oh, 10 and
Exactly.
15. But this is all sales
That's it.
tax, or is this all?
No, the blue and the red's the property tax offset.
You lost me.
No, hang on. Let me-
Okay.
The stacked pieces of the bars,
Right.
that is sales tax revenue that comes to a city.
Sales tax that comes to the city.
Sales tax.
Red or blue or whatever color, it's all sales.
What the red and the blue indicates is which portion of it is just the unencumbered, use as you see fit, and what portion of it is used to offset property tax rates. Okay?
Not really, but go ahead, maybe I'll get it.
It's,
I didn't know we did.
no matter where they apply it,
Earning this week.
it's revenue to the general fund.
Okay, good.
Right.
The red is,
So our local sales tax is 1.5 cents. The other ½ cent is AEDs.
And the red is ADC?
No, the-
No, we've tried to take off of this the portion of the sales tax collected by any of these cities, including us, that doesn't come to the general fund.
oh,
Back in 1990?
The vote was in '89.
89, for the property tax offset on the
So,
sales tax.
the
What
only-
is this one, though? I'm
Hang
confused.
on, we'll do that one in a
Okay,
second.
let me make sure. So the only part of our sales tax that doesn't come back to the city is what goes to AEDC, ½ cent.
Yes.
All right,
So local taxes are 2%.
okay.
When you pay your sales tax bill, 6 1/4 pennies of that goes to the state, 1.5 of that goes to the city, and then the remainder goes to AEDC.
Okay, I got that.
You have
So
a-
is that on here?
We've taken all the economic development corporations off.
Okay.
We've taken off the Metro Transit Authority taxes from Dallas-Fort Worth,
Of everybody's.
of everybody's. This is just to show what piece of the sales tax collected by a city ends up in that city's general fund.
Okay, then I gotta know what property tax relief means.
When we passed that back in '89 or whatever it was, we agreed to add this for AEDC purposes and then to lower property taxes.
Well,
thought
we
it
added
was
it for
schools.
city general fund.
Yeah.
Yes, and then I think ADC might have been separate. Wasn't the property tax relief was the ½ cent that went, increased our sales
It's a
tax.
calculation, Mayor, that amount of revenue comes off of your property tax, thus your property tax rate is lower.
So you have
It doesn't change the dollars, it changes which pocket the dollar came out of.
Okay.
and that one on property
Was that to preclude double taxing people for that portion?
No, property tax relief, Amarillo, City of Amarillo's tax rate was up in the 40-cent range
Yeah.
prior to this.
Really? Okay.
Very low 40s from.
All right, go ahead. If I get caught, I'll kind of catch up.
Okay. If you take everything that's represented by one of these bars, is sales tax money collected by that city that's going to that city's general fund,
Okay.
regardless of the color of it.
Gotcha. Okay, I got that.
Okay?
It's real money that was collected.
It's real money, and it really went to
From sales
somebody's
tax.
general fund, from the sales tax. Then, the line graph that has the numbers inserted on it,
Barbed wire.
the barbed wire graph, the barbed wire is the ad valorem tax rate. So as we had those discussions Thursday, I
Wow.
really got to, okay, we really think we're that much under. Are we really?
That's what I wanted.
With the time, this is as close as I think we can get.
That's good.
We're looking at general fund budgets, but to make those mean anything, because of population differentials, we're gonna have to normalize them to some, dollar per thousand population. And I don't know that that's gonna tell the tale.
You've been squeezing, what this means to me is you've been squeezing more than every nickel that bumper was squeezing.
I didn't realize I thought we were squeezed until we looked at it today.
No, I really thought this would be
District
important. This
section,
is
yeah,
important.
except sales.
And it shows both together.
Yeah,
Woo.
yeah.
Okay, good.
So
Good to know.
that, I appreciate that moment. We're gonna
So-
keep playing with some of these metrics. We're starting to, I think we're binning them, not
So,
finding them.
look at Waco for me for a minute, and use
Look at-
that as an example.
Look at Waco.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
So Waco gets as much sales tax as we do.
Same sales tax
Same
rate.
sales tax
Rate.
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 Okay, right, exactly, because they might have more people shopping. Got it. But their property taxes are that much higher.
Yes.
Okay, so they might even get more sales tax in because depending on
2.5
what's
times
happening. Yeah,
Probably less, just based on population. but-
okay.
Isn't it somewhat true that the higher the property taxes, because you don't have as good a sales tax revenue in some cases? We've been fortunate to hold we're staying off the backs of homeowners because our sales tax has been so good.
It could be. Some of that's just really the function of geography. Amarillo's a regional trade center. We don't worry about the town immediately across the Magic Line building a new mall.
Yeah.
Lubbock's a regional trade center. Midland, wake up. Now, you get up into the Grapevines, Irving's, Carrollton's, Frisco's, they fight over sales tax dollars
Because they're landlocked in there.
because they're landlocked, and they call it leakage is the term for it. But, Frisco, 20 years ago, spent all the money on all those brand new malls. Well, the next town over built them after they got 10 years old. So they're fighting over that. There's no more sales tax dollars in that economy other than population growth. It's just who gets it this year. A lot of what I think you will see, and I don't want to build this too complicated, but
No,
you're gonna
please,
see
this is
some,
more about you.
there's a serious debt component that's included in most of these tax rates. If you'll recall, and I'm gonna
17
give,
cents for one city, wasn't it?
I'm gonna give clean copies out today,
Something you
but,
already have.
yeah, something you already have, but
I'm gonna have to.
It's in here.
Yeah, yeah, I've got it.
oh, I've been sitting down trying to go through mine. Where did it?
Debt that's paid back
Yeah,
directly by the
your debt,
general fund.
your general fund,
Okay.
Michelle, I've lost it.
What do you want?
It might not have made the cut.
It didn't make the cut.
I've got my
We've got the 3 tax ones. so
This is a new one.
I need the,
Tax with the debt.
yeah, tax supported debt.
Story of my life, I make everything perfect over and over again.
So I think a significant part of some of these tax rates are gonna be, there's gonna be a big debt component. Your debt component's a little over 2 cents in Amarillo. Okay? Well, she's getting that other sheet, because I think it'll show it. When you hand these out.
Is that debt component, when you say 2 cents, is that only related to the general obligation or the $30 million in bonds for general obligation. Is that what that 2 cents?
It's tax supported
It's
general
not things
obligation.
like water board, water.
Correct.
No, that's just the.
Correct.
Just the
Tax
part
money.
that has to do
It's
Not
with
the
just the debt for which you're writing a check out of your property tax account.
property tax account. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Let me kind of send these
I've got
around.
another question about this.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
How many of these cities have senior tax freezes?
All of them.
Everybody that's dealt with that is passed.
It was only the smaller towns that substantially didn't end up adopting the freezes.
Uh,
Johnny Moore?
Yeah.
Other side.
Greedy.
George, do you want that?
He's already got one. This is also in response to the question that we talked about Thursday. We graphed it this time. If you take the first one, the pie chart, Potter County, the total tax rate's $2.32 in decimals. Okay? The city's portion of that's 14%. And then you can see,
13.76.
we're trying to get you out of too many decimals. So we've broken that out so that you can see that.
Look at Amon College, they're so good.
Turn the page and look at Randall. Now, interestingly enough, right before we started today, the Randall County Commissioners still voted to raise their tax rate by 0.8 cents, so this is wrong now.
But it was increased than you did. 56%.
Yeah, I think it's 0.8, right at a penny. So anyway, that's just another way of looking at that. Now we've got Randall County to show you. Again, the takeaway from that's just simply not that anybody disagrees with the fact that property taxes can get expensive. The portion of such being collected that ends up going to the city for our operations is pretty minor
Not the top number.
piece. The other charts, we just put your proposed tax rate, your penny plus, your 2 penny plus into that same chart that we'll see now for the rest of this progress.
Well, and that assumes that none of these other cities raise their taxes.
That's right.
That is correct, because we're using the last year's tax rate. And I was going to say, I was reading the newspaper for Lubbock the other day, and they quoted Lubbock's general fund budget as being $641 million. I'm thinking, the entire city of Amarillo budget's $2.4 million. So I don't know if that included LPL being added on, I don't know. Point being, we're trying to go back to sources that we can prove up.
Apples, apples.
Well, in that city, what do they have to service their debt? 17 cents?
Well, they're servicing about 250.
10 times ours.
Probably, of course, it depends all on what they did. Did they run that out 30 years? Some of the bonds that I know they have, by law, they could do it 40. I don't know if they did. But again, I don't know that this totally answers all the questions, but I think going back to the one with the barbed wire on it, to me, this helps reinforce what I thought where we were relatively speaking.
That's important to me because we've talked about a possible increase to health police and other city needs. Commissioner Eads had to leave, importantly had to leave when we had that discussion. Pretty quicker, I think we need to go back through that.
But he
We
didn't
didn't,
really know the tax.
we certainly didn't conclude anything. They had to pay their fair share.
Yeah, we didn't. Lot of food for thought.
Yeah, it is.
Need chocolate. Basic.
That's all right. Okay. Any questions just on these metrics? And we haven't actually gotten into the conversation. Any of the metrics that were handed around?
This is great.
I don't understand the water thing.
Which water thing?
Residential 10,000 gallon water use 2013 rates.
Okay, let's go over that real quick. Yeah, that's in the packet. What this chart is, since every city does their water rates differently, some people you get no water for your base rate, some people you get quite a bit of water for your base rate. You've got to find the lowest common denominator so that you can compare. And at least as long as I've been in the water game, that's always been 10,000 for residential. So this chart is what a 10,000 gallon water bill would look like for each of these cities. And then the two bars are Amarillo, Amarillo current, Amarillo proposed. And then those same metrics, Commissioner, carry over into commercial. We can actually do this. You could do a residential 50. The data's out there, but the portion of your accounts that actually use that much on a residential basis is pretty small. Water is expensive and love it. But what's interesting, if you flip back in there until you get to wastewater, look at how inexpensive, relatively speaking, Lovett's wastewater is. It just really hits the median, where their water rates are kind of what's pulling the lines up with them. Historically, Amarillo, if you adjust one rate, you've adjusted the other, so they haven't really gotten very far away from each other. Wastewater is a direct function of the water you sell, so.
Is it common
Take it away.
for cities, is it common for cities to push most of their water rates to commercial?
Depends. That's a somewhat philosophical decision that can be made, yes.
And you're out there asking people to support economic development. Interesting.
Well, you take a water conservation program to its extreme and really make it work. There are two examples of that in the state that I'm familiar with. What eventually happens, and it takes a while to get there, the water system's like anything else. There's a fixed cost associated with having so many feet of pipe and so many valves and pumps and motors and peoples. And that fixed cost is constant, whether your house used 5,000 gallons this much or 50. Well, when you're making the difference on consumption, which is what we do, which is what I think is proper, you use it, you pay for it. When consumption comes down in a dramatic fashion all across the board, those fixed costs didn't come down. So now you eventually have to increase your base charges for the folks that aren't using the water to help you cover those fixed costs. Takes a long time to get there. We're nowhere near that, but that's the inevitable conclusion of some of those programs.
Well, it sure gives you comfort that we're in a good position and that we've squeezed a lot out of little. It does me. It confirms what we suspect looking through the book for 2.5 days.
Your effective rate this year is a little over 31.5 cents. But the base budget was built at 32.009, which is your present rate. The discussions on Thursday ultimately led us to two additional considerations. Jim and I have been coloring our sheets, and I know that means I'll never find what I need to find.
I'm sorry.
It has yellow. It has yellow on it.
Which stack is it?
It's the one we've got.
I know.
You got stacks for
That
stacks.
probably wouldn't sit well with mother or father.
You have it.
I got it somewhere in there.
Do you need another copy?
I might.
He
It's
has it,
somewhere
we
in
just
my
can't
stack.
find
He
it.
was very organized when he was looking.
I was very organized.
He's being an
Thank you. Okay, so what's the point here?
different
Now that
tax
I got the
rates.
thing in.
Point is, we're not done crunching numbers yet.
Okay, let's keep moving.
Okay.
Pulling trees, okay.
Second column from the left, 2013, 2014 effective. This is what we went over when we started the budget. So there's your 31.521 cents. Move to the next column, 13, 14 base budget. That was, as we began our discussions last Tuesday morning, 32,009, reflecting a 1.55% increase in the tax rate. Now, that's not the same thing as 1.55% more money. That all starts to wiggle, but that's the rate. The next column, 13, 14 base plus 1. Now you're at 33,009, 4.72. Carry down a little bit farther, and now you can see the revenue change. So to the general fund, that's about 1.3, and that's 1.3 as compared to the effective. And the reason we chose to do it that way, that's how all of your notices work. It's not 1.3 over the base budget. It's actually 900,000 over the base budget.
Round down,
That's
always
one.
round
You're
down.
talking
I
about
know, I'm very
1.308,
impressed.
Just for 530.
Yes, sir. I have my human calculator here. If we have any questions.
I'm just gonna sit next to Jim, he knows all.
It's steady.
The farthest right column then is that same math based on 34,009. So that's a 7.89% increase in the rate. That's not the same thing as 7.89 against the rollback. We're just, this is apples to apples as much as you can make this calculation.
And we reported 5%, so that's why you're reporting this.
To the rollback.
You'll pick some version of one of these columns today, and Michelle will lift these numbers and drop them into the notice that'll appear in the paper Thursday.
We can pick anything from that point under. What is the rollback rate? You said it's not that. It's
The
5
rollback
points.
rate's actually just a little over 35 cents. It's 35.172 cents.
And what percentage would that be?
Well, it's 8% increase revenue, not 8% increase rate. So now you've got to start backing in and out your frozens and stuff like that. Yeah, my head split open in places.
Well, we're safe either way. I mean, we're safe.
Yeah,
We're safe.
we're not.
The rollback rate's gonna be lower than this 7.8.
Rollback rate's higher than that.
Higher.
But it doesn't,
You're under
Trigger.
it. You're under it.
Trigger.
we're under.
You're under it.
Yeah, we're under it.
Okay, good.
We're not the roll.
Yes, ma'am.
You're a penny away from rollback.
This discussion got started based on police and went further into other city needs. And I guess that's, Brian, you weren't in here, we sure wanted to have this discussion with you. We didn't include anything either, we threw out ideas. Obviously, we're putting out an idea that we published today, but we still have time to discuss it at least 2 more times, maybe 4, I guess. But I don't want us to, as Jim stated very well, if we have those needs, we don't want to just bypass them. We should be discussing debate.
Well, and there's others, as I pointed out last week. To me, this was one person's view. The most important, besides the police, I think we were all pretty much, well, I'm going to say, I had no problem with the 1 penny increase to cover 10 additional officers, police officers, on top of the 3 that are already in the budget for public staff. Yeah. But then I said, we have other responsibilities, let's look at some of those. And I cited specifically that I thought that the increase that the staff had put in pay of 2.75% was too low. I suggested we consider at least a penny there of increase in tax rate, which would raise that from 2.75 to 3.75 to of an
The year
increase.
they didn't get.
They did not get one in '09.
And the managers didn't get one for 2 years. The employees didn't get
Correct.
one for one, the managers for 2 years.
Then I even took it a step further, and this didn't seem to stick or to get much traction at all. And that is, sometime we're gonna have to start considering the needs that we have in IT, that we know are coming. I mean, that's already on the board. It's not here, but we know that we're gonna have to, especially when it comes to communication devices.
Well, that chart
Oh,
shows
yeah.
$1.6 million next year, and then for the next 4 or 5 years, an additional $1.6 million.
But
So if
no
we get
rest
too far
of it.
behind, we're never gonna catch up.
Well, it'd be like so many other areas that we get behind in and seem like we stay behind in. And then the other one was, and I was proposing that we consider a quarter to a half of a cent increase for those needs. And then, here again, Michael Rice was stating to us, we took a huge step forward in last year's budget when we made the dedication of 2 cents,
2 years, 1 cent,
1 cent, excuse me.
but it was 2 years ago, so.
2 years ago.
We've had 2 years of that.
Addressing the needs of our streets. And yet all we're doing is just kind of treading water.
Well, we're getting ahead, but we're not,
It's-
we got several years left.
So I was saying maybe we need to consider, neither one of those last 2 items, the IT idea or the street idea, seem to have any traction. So that's where we are. And I expressed that I thought that, you know, we brag on our employees, we commend them for services and for jobs well done. We go to the picnic in order to show our appreciation for the work that they do, the different honors banquets that they have. You know, we raved about the job that they did when we had the 22-inch snow, when we had the water breakout north of town. I mean, there's different examples of how we try to praise our city staff. And this really, to me, reaches down to the lower levels of our employment staff. And that's why that was driving my desire to see us consider having an across-the-board increase based upon merit reviews of 3.75% instead of 2.75%.
But that is obviously gonna be up to the city manager and the manager's discretion within the ranks.
Well, as they
I mean, just as it is, we
evaluate.
don't wanna micromanage that.
No.
We just
No,
wanna
but they'll-
provide the ability.
But they'll have the funds if
No,
if
we
this
wanna
goes
provide the
through.
ability.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, the other thing that's been significant to me is until it was really explained, I don't think I thought through that if you increase 10 policemen, if you don't do it out of a tax rate, you don't sustain them forever in the budget, it becomes a variable.
it's not like a capital.
No, it's not like capital. I mean, and it's not like, well, we're gonna get sales tax increase this year, next year's down a little. If we hire people for a career, the only real way to deal with that funding, in my view, now that I've been taught, is through a raise that is sustained for a career, and that's with a tax rate.
And when you break it down with the number of employees that we have, and I'm only calculating this, and correct me if I'm wrong, you numbers people, and that is, with the staff, it's right at 2,000. 2,000 is the number that I was using in my calculator on mine. The pay increase would mean something $40 to $45 a year if they got the full 3.75. I think I rounded it up to 4 from here again, mental calculation. See, grabbing from the fingers.
Calculators
I
out.
didn't quite follow
I
that.
didn't either.
Well, okay, you increase the pay raises to 3.75%, that's about $1 million.
Right.
Use that million and divide it among the permanent employees, and we have a lot of part-time. We have 1,800 full-time and like 362 or 92 part-time. We got everybody working on it. I hear the clicking.
But still,
I think that should be at the discretion of the department.
yes, I believe that we, while giving direction
Well, yeah.
and
But I'm trying to give you a
philosophy,
picture
Yeah.
of what the
Yeah.
average
Yeah.
would be. No, and it's based upon merit. It's
I don't
based
think
upon
we sit here
performance.
guaranteeing anything.
No, We do not.
Well, the other thing I think is interesting, if you go to the other penny we were talking about, if you take the police and we raise it to 3, we go from 1.73 average per thousand. In the national standards 2, we go to 1.76. That leaves us 43 policemen behind the national average. And if we had 10, we're still 33 policemen behind.
This has the 10.
Okay, that still leaves us 33 policemen, if we increase it, 33 policemen below the national standard. And so I don't think we're doing anything really
Rocket
extraordinary.
science, you get one?
We have this.
Come on, man.
No, this is a new one.
Oh.
This is with what it would be if you added the 10.
It'd still be.
And what we heard was, it's sure been established in the last week since we heard about it, is that major crime and detectives dealing with crime are areas that we're really suffering in. If you look at just the headlines in the newspaper for the last 7 days since we heard that, I would tell you that verifies exactly the problem we're dealing with.
Exactly.
Well, the thing that you, more than local crime that we've experienced in the last week, remember what the chief of police sitting here and telling us about the increase in crime rate is coming. We know the report, what the report's going to say. And what he thought was causing this, and it started at the state level, of the state cutting down on the population in the prisons. And then the same thing locally, district attorneys not prosecuting, but making deals and turning people loose.
Well, to be fair, the other part was that when there's a fine assigned, instead of them sitting in jail 30 days, they get out and they're supposed to pay it off.
And they don't pay the fine.
And funny how those people don't
Plus,
always do it.
it's just more or less a revolving door. And we're facing the brunt of that at the local level. Then just this week,
Federal.
our Attorney General says, we're gonna turn these people out of the prisons. And I'm not one to debate how severe a sentence someone for drug possession, a small drug possession, what they should be adjudicated for. I'm not smart enough to figure that out. But I know that as these people are released from prison, they're gonna be coming hitting our streets and committing crimes.
You don't
to
think
buy
they're
those
all
drugs.
rehabilitated?
Sure.
We've never had a system that would.
So, I mean, I think the problem is exacerbated just this week. Not just the crimes that have been committed, but what's coming down the road, so.
Well, I'm gonna ask that we suggest 2 cents. We'll start a discussion, but we certainly can carry it from there. We don't have to conclude anything today, but it sets the high mark that we can come below.
We
I
can
agree.
always go back down, we can't go up.
Can go up.
I think there's
Maximum tax
absolute-
rate will be 34.34009 under that suggestion.
And that,
Is this requiring the?
that leaves us a list of needs that is enormous, people doing that.
Still,
Because if you just look at the IT expenditure coming up, if we don't deal with this now, how in the world for the next 5 years are we gonna deal with that 1.6 we're gonna come up with to update IT every year on top of all these things we just discussed? If we don't start facing the music now, we don't realize this is significant. When we look at this chart and we see us so far below everybody else, that starts to have a negative impact on our ability to run the city.
well, Mr. Barry, you suggest we increase taxes by 2.5 cents?
Nope, I'm saying 2.
Okay,
Marcus,
checking your water.
how would you word that? We propose as high as, or as much as,
Maximum,
a maximum rate?
Can I ask a couple of questions here?
a maximum proposed rate.
Okay.
You're figuring in a nutrition rate at the police department about 3.
Yeah, attrition's gonna be closer to 8 to 9. It's come down. We were averaging more than 1 a month. Talking about for retirement.
Yes.
We were averaging slightly more than 1 a month, and it's back to 8, 9.
But I mean, between the ones that you're losing and the ones that you're gaining through the academy, aren't you getting behind about 3? Don't you generally have to replace 3 in addition every year? Seems like that's a number I heard.
If if I remember, I think I said that, I was saying you need to go up a net of 3 a year to stay up just with your base population change.
That's
So if you did that, that doesn't take you upward or
You're never gonna
downward.
catch up.
Yeah, you're
Let's
still
stay even.
staying.
Yes.
You're never gonna move towards the 2.2.
And Brian, I would say, and that's what this shows, the +3 in the base budget, 177 or 176. So that kept you constant, is what it did. It didn't move the
didn't
ball.
bump it up.
But the ball didn't go backwards either.
So how many key spots do we have funded currently in the budget? And versus how many do we have? Are all spots currently funded still?
No. There's always a lag in that between the time that you have a retirement or a position added and the time you can clear them out of the academy.
There's very few, they told us.
Yeah, we're not very far under right now.
So the numbers that were quoted here, are those numbers of officers on the street or those that are funded?
Authorized strength, so.
So we actually don't have that many on the street at the moment. When
Correct.
you look at authorized strength.
Correct.
But it's not far off, Brian. I asked that question, they said it's major, it's just a matter of rotating through class, getting graduates.
Just presume each slot is filled. to make this
Certified.
chart.
Now, you had built into the calculations here a pay raise of 2.75%.
Average.
And the inflation rate, CPI, the most commonly used one, is an increase of 1.8.
It's greater than CPI for this year.
Yeah, 1.8, I think, is the most commonly used index. So what you're talking about, Jim, is an increase of 3.75%.
Correct.
Okay. So is the motivation behind going double the CPI, is that because we're having a hard time filling positions?
Well, now, remember, I'm talking about our employment force across the board, not just police officers.
No, I'm into the generalized
Yeah,
across the board rate.
and here again, at least I interpreted some of the things that I was hearing, that yes, we're not that competitive, and sometimes, especially if you get into the minimum wage people, and I don't know what percentage of our employment force is.
Significant.
I would think it would be here again because of the duties or the work that I know that we do, where the numbers are.
We talked about specifically about mechanics.
We talked about entry level of firemen and police in other cities, we talked about mechanics, and we certainly are talking about the lowest level, for instance, the bus drivers.
Okay. So then why, I'm just trying to understand your thinking, but why are we talking about across the board when what the focus really needs to be is on the lower 2 or 3 tiers on the pay scale?
Well, I don't know that's going to be left up to the department heads as to where they concentrate the raise increases based upon, what am I trying to say? Merit, and doing the reviews. That's still not the right word.
No, that's correct. We established that midpoint, that average number. And then based upon the rated performance of those employees, they get a little more or a little less. Now, all candor, now that's not how it works in police and fire. Those are not merit-based increases in police and fire. That is across the board, and it applies to all of the steps. Sure. State law establishes their steps, so.
But I think
every patrol grade X years gets the same thing.
Okay, but advancement, really, you don't automatically after a certain number of years get an advance, right? Aren't there some merit-based advances? They're all based on time.
They're all based on time and testing as far as promotions. And that carries up through the PD, that carries through the captains. So your 2 colonels and your chief are the merit-based promotions. In fire, everybody up through district chief is test-based, and one of the 2 assistant chiefs is selected on a test base. So in fire, you've got 1 assistant and 1 chief that's merit-based.
So you basically, you can't pass the test, you won't pass.
Or choose just not to take the test. In that case, they hit the top of their step in whatever grade they're in, and they don't move from that point.
I don't want to present something, though, that we're tying anybody's hands as far as departments or your hands, that we're allowing because we see a need. But that is at the discretion of you. Once we give you the funding, you guys decide, not us, how that's disseminated through the ranks and where and how you do merit or what you do with it.
Retention.
Anything, because you know, I mean, the things we've heard over time, we can't answer. We've heard CDL people getting their CDL on our nickel leaving. We've heard all sorts of stories about employees that we don't understand the day-to-day. We don't need to. But I think Jim's philosophy about this is, well, man, when I stopped and tried to figure it out last week, Brian, the first question I asked is, how long was it that they skipped a year? And the employees, every one of them skipped 09, and the managers skipped 09 and 10 for no raise. So that was kind of how I figured CPI.
And I understand, and people always talk about individuals on fixed income. But you know, a lot of people are on fixed incomes. A lot of people in this city are on fixed incomes, and they don't get pay increases every year.
Sure.
I know some employees personally haven't pay raises in 4 years.
Yeah.
And so, it's not just people over age 65. It's a lot of people on fixed incomes. So, let me go back to where I was going before. What percentage of the jobs like at entry level are running unfilled because of, you think, inability to recruit due to pay concerns?
The most basic entry level,
Something else?
I can give it to you a number of positions
I mean,
pretty
we could look
quickly,
at
but
it
as a
and we'll
percentage, I don't know that I can.
Our
What
lowest,
what you're talking about, your $9 an hour utility worker?
Sure, part.
Is the turnover high, and does it matter that the turnover's high? I mean, are you investing a lot in training and then they leave?
You don't put as much time and expense into the training at those lower levels. Where your time and expense is in training is drivers, police and fire. Well, that's your major expense.
And then how big of a deal the market competition is, how many people are siphoning off their employees?
And I don't think that this is so empirical, other than we've tried to watch it closely for 9 years as we adjust rates here and there. I haven't yet seen that we've moved anything to where the money changed the empirical turnover. And a lot of it's because you are competing, even down to those lower levels, with industry that's hot today that we can't match. But you'll see a lot of those folks come back. That's pretty true. Our lowest turnover rates ever were 09 and 10. There weren't jobs out there. There are now.
And so people are like, there's a lot of intangibles that the city that I didn't consider. You know, stuff like, I know, healthcare plans, for example. The city has a pretty high deductible, but not unlike other employers. But what the city has is a city care clinic where 90% of people can get their care all year long without ever having to delve into their deductible. You know, I just having watched patterns in my office, most people need routine things you can get at the city care clinic. Not many people are needing stuff like that. So, you know, you figure in a high deductible plan, which is currently at, what do you say, 800, but access city care clinic, that's a huge benefit. And we never have carved out exactly the cost of the city care clinic. It's in the healthcare budget, right? It's in the.
It's got a standalone budget.
It's got a standalone budget, so you can calculate that. And so that's a huge valuable benefit to people, that where they're not out of pocket money that any other employee in the city who doesn't have insurance or has a $800 or $1,000 deductible, they're out of pocket that money. And so that's a huge benefit. You know, without going into details, the retirement plan in the city is incredible. I would challenge anybody to tell me anybody in the private sector has a retirement plan. And I understand that lower level, first level, second level, third level employees, they don't appreciate that at their place they are in life. That's why it would interest me more to focus, if we're going to focus, and really want to help people, why aren't we helping people on the lower levels rather than doing something like that across the board? And that's my concern, is because a lot of people getting this twice CPI pay raise do appreciate and understand and know how to use the retirement plan, which I bet's the best retirement plan in the whole city. And so that's another issue that concerns me in taking this proposal to people in the city now who are on very I think that we've, you know, not even mention the post-employment benefits and the retirees. But I really worry about the people in the city and the fact that they're not having increases. And they're struggling, and there's no question that senior staff, every department, do incredible work. I mean, look at these numbers. What they're able to squeeze out of a dime is incredible. But I don't think that we have, I'm not a fan of racing toward the commonality of other cities when we're making headway on where we're going. I just think an 8% increase in property tax values when we're already making progress against these issues, I think that's too much. And that's concerning to me. We've hit the people of this city hard. We've got controversy over a drainage utility, which I think is absolutely necessary. I support it 100%. We've had a pretty dramatic increase in sales tax revenue. It's maybe like say 60% that comes from outside the city.
But it is not on the backs of our citizens,
No,
which
it's
is
not.
really, really helpful.
It's really helpful.
So
And-
what would you suggest?
Well, I'm thinking about it. I don't know. I'm no expert. I understand what Jim's saying, and he's been here longer than anybody else, and he sees the employees, and frankly, you attend more of these events than I do, where you're pressing the flesh with the employees, and so you know their personal stories. I take care of them in my office, but you know their personal stories often better than I do. So I wouldn't pretend to know it better. But I would rather focus it on people that are more disadvantaged than do across the board things.
Brian, I think we're back, this is my thought, along with what Jim was saying. I don't want to encumber the management with micromanaging how they disseminate this, but if I look back at the people I press the flesh with in the city, and I look back at how they're comparatively paid to our private employees at my business and at the larger business where we sold it, we're not overpaying anybody, and yet I know the benefits. I agree with you. I think some of the benefits are enormously good. The retirement is enormous. The health care is wonderful. But the base amount that you get people, attract them, grow them with, build careers with, there's all sorts of areas. We could say mechanics. We could say, we've talked about fire and police. We've talked about real numbers in other cities. We also haven't talked this time, but I know they're not going to say it in here, but city attorney staff compared to other city attorneys and what they make, they're not going to say that in here. But if I don't want to hamper the manager's ability to deal with this. I want to enhance their ability to attract and reward the best employees. But beyond that, I don't care if they give it to Ben Gump or to Joe Blow. I don't care. That's not for me to discern, because I can't sit here and pretend to know every department. They took months to deal with each department, and they will every year. All I know is I agree with Jim that we're not adequately compensating employees, and I agree the base employees, but I think still we have to give that philosophy to them and let them disseminate it the way they see fit. And I don't think we should hamstring them with some kind of a mandate, other than the 10 policemen, a mandate about how this other penny is spent. We know there's areas of need in employment, but we also know we're facing a huge requirement, undeniable requirement in IT. We got 3,600 plus computers out there. They're aging out. We looked at that trend line and that budget. We know for the next 5 years we're going to have 1.6 or more. It's easy to identify employment, which I appreciate, Jim, because it's a philosophy. But it isn't just that. If we didn't identify streets before, we'd still spent the money wisely on something, probably streets. We know we fixed to a degree the trend line for streets. We're fixing to a degree the trend line for base employment for the ones that need it most. That's the ones you've expressed concern about. We also know that we're not, we're giving our taxpayers the best bang for the buck in the state of Texas. The best bang, whether it be in property tax, whether it be in The sales tax that comes from our citizens in this town, it's really low, where the benefit we get from that, whether it be from the utility fee that we enacted, that's 10 times lower than some cities. It's $1, others are $10. It's 10 times lower. The water rates are lower. And the point is, I don't want to do something that precludes us advancing this city and growing. We've got in the last 12 months, a capital expense item recognized when we opened up a sewer to expand business west of Sonsi, and a 40-foot sewer geyser started. And we have to deal with that and get a 32-inch line now about 4 miles south. It's going to be another $6 million. That wasn't even contemplated in the capital budget a year and a half ago, or a year ago. So all these things can come on our way. We're growing at an exponential rate, and we're just either going to push these things. We haven't done that, but we are not overtaxing anybody, any way, shape, or form.
Well, and here again, I'm trying to view this, I feel like at least my responsibility, or our responsibility individually, is to view this from 20,000 feet, however you want to put it. Amarillo's property taxes have increased 4 cents in the last 20 years. 4 cents, that's not per cents, that's cents. We're proposing 2, or what we're considering is 2. We're a major employer in the city with 1,800 full-time employees and another 3 and some change part-time employees. But the 18 alone would qualify us as a major employer. I have no idea, don't really need to know what other major employers are doing with their pay scales. But I think that we're living in a time, we're blessed to be living in a time when it can be done. And I think that's when we address it. And I realize that pay is forever. It's not like going out and buying a new truck or building a building. It's not a capital. It's an item that will go on. And then here again, I continue to be amazed and proud of the job that we get out of these people. Even at the pay scale that they're at now, we still, I think we get a super bang for the buck, if that's what you call it. But because I don't think that there's a city anywhere that can hold our tennis shoes when it comes to having a job well done.
Let me give you a few things where we can cut back on and we're suffering. I stood on a street on 46th south of Tradewinds with a resident who had stuff running down the back of his house because we couldn't afford to put in a proper drainage line. And it's because of the expansion of Tradewinds that was compounded. We go out and talk to citizens out on Fairway Boulevard where there should have been streets with sidewalks that they can run on instead of running there. I go out to Pavlard to talk to those people and talk about the lack of city services compared to other areas that were incorporated when they were brought into the city. Still want. I go on Bell Street and see older women walking down the street with groceries because we can't put in sidewalks. I can make you a list and go ad infinitum about the things that we are turning our eye to. It's easy to talk about employees, it's easy to talk about police, it's easy to talk about fire and public safety. But overall, we have to recognize that I'm not talking about a lot more, but to provide the service to our city and grow it all. We could not even consider doing a sports complex since the citizens came forward and said they would unite and propose a bond issue. That's up to the citizens to vote on. We're talking about basic services that we took an oath to support. And to me, I don't think we're raising anything much at all. Some of those things I mentioned are not on your capital needs list because the list is too long. They aren't on there. I can make you a longer list if you'd like, standing talking with citizens in the street, talking about how we do that. I'm not sure, I think there's an opportunity to get rid of doing the rock, to refurbish the streets. Go to this microcrossing. I don't know what the cost is. You go around the city and look at it. I can take any quadrant of the city and talk to you about standing in the middle of the street with citizens that are begging us for something proper. You can't afford the engineering study to deal with the lake at T Anchor in a proper way. There's...
Several years ago,
before I was on the commission, didn't the commission give a base rate increase to like beginning employees? What was that? Do you remember that?
We did.
Now, was that a commission decision or a management decision?
We proposed it in the budget.
Management asked for it. I was on the commission then.
Yep.
Management asked for it, and we supported it because they painted this picture of then, Brian, some of the questions you asked is how much are we doing turnover, how much we're dealing with it. And it's hard to stop that completely, but we stemmed some of it.
You know, one other, I think it was you, Jim, or you, Mayor, who said that you've got the mile-high view. And we, from a philosophical, I don't need to dominate this conversation. Y'all have
No,
One of the
You weren't here last week.
mile-high views is that we have got plans for an athletic complex. And we've got plans, all of us, I think, have a unanimity in purpose in wanting to do something with the Menlo Civic Center. You know,
Both things will be voted on by
both
citizens.
things, that's right. And the other issue I'm a little concerned about is, as we look forward from a mile-high view, is creating an environment that makes people uncomfortable with voting for things that they would otherwise vote for. And that's a huge concern, that we create a reaction formation in 1 year, 3 years. When they look at, you said we had a 4% increase in 20 years. Well, we're looking now at a 4% increase since I've been on the commission, if this goes through. And that's what I'm worried, is a reaction formation that precludes us from doing big visionary things that we're wanting to do in the next few years, and we may be going.
Well, and we discussed that last week, and I can't remember at what point in the program it was, but I think it was after you had left. Somebody else brought up that, or you did, I believe, Mayor. And my response to that is, Dr. Eads, we, the 5 of us, have a responsibility in the way the city is run. And that starts with fire and police, and then it goes down to the commode flushing when you trip it, and the water comes on when you turn on the spigot. And we have those responsibilities. This RNC proposal is coming up, as well as whatever the decision is made on the Civic Center. The people are going to tell us how they feel about that, because then we are going to be really getting into their pockets. And they need a decision on that. In this case, yes, we are getting into their pockets, but I feel like we're doing what our job is, and that we have the authority, but more especially the responsibility.
There is a cross to, for instance, the street example. If we avoid spending $100,000 on the street and let it go too long, we know that will eventually become $1 million because we let the street base be destroyed. That's true with a lot of other things. For instance, the computer system. We don't keep updating the computer system, it'll be catastrophic. We had it at our business where we kept putting it off. We finally got a virus. We had a 10-time exposure to updating. With 3,600 employees, or 3,600 computers, that weighs on my mind to think about what's going to happen if we don't stay up with that. We have no choice. With the streets, with the expansion of sidewalks, with the growth that we've seen, and I don't apologize that yes, we have had things go up. We put in a drainage utility. I'm proud of that. We put in a penny for streets. We're talking about a penny for police. We're talking about operating a city that we're still, after doing all that, and Brian, Dr. Eads, if you talk about
Brian's fine.
Coming up next, we know what's coming up next. And it'll still, if the voters approve those 3 things, the sports deal and what we're thinking about with the Civic Center, if they approve those over the next 6 years, we'll still be way below our nearest cities in the state of Texas. Way below. And so I'm looking at how we're squeezing this nickel, trying to figure it out. And my whole objective looking at those books of budget this time was, where is something here? When I came on the commission, I didn't believe in a tax increase, and I went back and put a little book together, discovering every reserve the city had. That's what finally translated into that sheet he gave you. Because we pulled out, I went and talked to people and found out where every friggin' reserve was. I want to know what's there before I'm going to spend the money. I want to know there's no, it's not like it's hidden, but how many pockets you got? Which pocket are we reaching in now? And we've reached in all the pockets. We put it out on the table. We've dealt with everything we have, and if I put the needs list, they're reticent to put the real capital needs list out there. It'll scare the bejeebers out of you. Spell that, quote that. It'll scare the bejeebers out of you if you knew what the real capital needs were in this city. And I think we're barely touching the surface of what our responsibility is to move ahead. And I don't think we're overtaxing anyone. Certainly, the voters will decide that too. If they think we are, they'll vote us out. And I think they should vote us out if we don't take care of our responsibilities.
Well, and I agree with that, Mayor. And when for years, and I've been guilty of this myself, we brag about having the lowest tax rate in the state among, I don't know, 100,000 population cities and up. What big deal?
We still will.
We still, that's
If we
correct.
do all this, we still
because
will.
The next highest above us, if we're 34.34009, will be 43 and some change.
If you really like that brag, you can still do it.
Well,
After all
but-
this is finished, you can still do it.
But I would rather have the best city among all of these, the best run, the best performance with the best personnel, and the best, morale, because we're attempting to take care of them.
If you don't spend enough, and I'd like to hear clarification from the experts, from what I heard at the meetings with Standard & Poor's and Moody's, if you don't have a proper debt structure, if you don't take care of the future needs of your city, you risk your bond rating as well as if you overdo something. You have to have a balance, and I think if we look at our budget, we find a better, more qualified, balanced budget than most cities in the whole United States. Verified by the actual number, there's only 5 cities in the state of Texas that have water and sewer bonds and general obligation bonds with a AAA rating. Out of 33,000 cities rated in the United States, 33,000, we're one of 28. 28. 2 digits.
Well, we've got the lowest tax rate, the lowest water rates, the lowest drainage utility fee, however you want to compare.
We've got probably
Debt per capita.
10 less attorneys working for this city than our sister city
Well, of course,
100
he's
miles
making
south.
$1 million. I saw
They
that in his budget.
got 10, that's his whole staff. They got 10 more attorneys there than we have.
And the
We gotta be doing something right if we don't need all those attorneys.
Don't talk to an OB-GYN doctor about what attorneys make.
I'm talking about having less, Brian, I'm talking about having less attorneys on the face of the earth.
Hit a soft spot there.
I'd like to get 2 per 1,000,
Yeah, you would, wouldn't you? Yeah, you would.
I'm not staying if that's
I'm not either.
397 attorneys.
I'm not either.
You can have 2 per 100,000.
2 per 100,000.
So where's that put you?
Yeah.
Way over.
I think you're overstaffed.
I'll call that tomorrow.
I got him to wake up. and-
So what you're saying, Brian, is you're okay with the police, but you're not okay with the raises?
Well, yeah, I don't,
He doesn't have to make that decision today.
That's right.
I think it's one thing to offset the increase in crime rate by hiring police. It's something totally different to do across the board twice CPI pay raises, and that's a totally different animal. And if you're asking me to pigeonhole things into categories of where they go, I think it's all one thing. It's just deciding on priorities, so I really can't generalize like that.
I think the priority is what my mind's working towards. I love the priority of police because we've seen the matter-of-fact reasons why it's needed. So that's easy, in my mind, to justify. But as far as, Jim, your identification of pay raises, and Brian, your discussion about who should get them, yet we're still looking at other capital needs, I really think it's up to the guy we hire to work with his managers to decide where that money goes. Because it's obviously not been included in the budget they proposed. I'd hand him back that if we agree, if it's voted on eventually, that it's 2 cents, it's fine if they give, it's fine for me if they give part of it to the IT question. It's fine if they give part of it to the sidewalks on Bell Street that are needed, or to the drainage on 46, or to the Pavlov streets that are falling apart. I think that's their decision. I think I can justify the expenditure with a list that's extraordinary, an extraordinary list of things that are needed that we're not able to keep up with. That's where I think my responsibility lies, to make my decision based on that. And that's what I signed up for.
Well, all we're doing today, as you said, is proposing the high water mark.
That's right.
And we have 4 more discussions to talk about where that ends up.
I still don't think the high water mark's very high compared to other cities. And that's what we have to compare to. I think we've been very frugal and we're continuing to be very frugal.
Of course, we can go higher than 2 cents.
Well, if the seniors didn't have a tax freeze, it could be less, I guess. Stir that pot a little bit. No. Nope. Okay, do we need to talk in here about what this, how are we gonna set this tax rate when it comes out of agenda?
Mayor, you'll call that item.
Whose is that item?
It is, it's,
Number 11, that's Brian's.
Brian's.
Which one's mine?
That one. That's why I'm for public hearing.
I think you need to, Mayor, call that item. Call for the discussion amongst the commission. You might want to, actually, let me back up a little bit. If you want to turn that over and call on me, I'll be glad to explain what the current effective rate is. The base
Right.
budget rate, the discussions. Take your comment, take your counsel amongst yourselves, and then a motion to vote.
And the motion, the rotation on the motion is simply perfunctory. It doesn't have to be that way, Brian, or any of you. We have just had the habit of move so we know who's gonna do what. But you can, anybody.
But I will make an observation. It seems like I always draw the black pea.
You do.
Almost all.
I want to start at the,
Hey,
hey,
even Kevin knows.
I think he's largely correct.
Brian, do you want to start at the other end? We'll start with Ellen.
Even when one of y'all is-
Minutes, nobody will get anything
You're
right.
happy.
I know.
It gets to make one wonder if it's planned better.
Yeah, but either there's
If I
no,
were that mathematically
There's no
skilled,
option.
I could probably fix some of these other things
Yeah,
too.
or if you,
I'll-
or
I'll
if you
decide.
just want to instead of.
Yeah,
And if he-
I don't.
You don't want
So
to.
it's cool.
Huh?
Let's go.
Okay, you're gonna,
I'll skip, we'll skip over.
okay, that's fine. Again, we're setting a top, we aren't setting.
Okay, so this is
Fine.
going to be a
Exactly.
development.
We're having a great discussion. We've learned a lot through this budget process, an awful lot.
Well, and as I said when we started, it's caused Michelle and I and Lauren and some others to try to look at these metrics in a different way and create them, and appreciate having the opportunity to do that, or having the reason to go do that.
well, I don't know how many trees you'll kill.
Bunch.
You know that chart you gave us today?
Yes, sir.
I want to see that with power.
This chart?
I don't know if you can do that, you can't do
Well,
that. Doesn't matter,
The dollars are not
Yeah.
gonna work
because of population.
unless you normalize them, and if you normalize them, you've gotta figure out,
You can't.
you know, where are they counting solid waste? I mean, it just.
No, you can't do even land mass, 22 square miles versus what's the average for land?
No, because now you're making a
Yeah,
density
you can't do it.
calculation.
Okay.
This is as close as we could get for having started on Friday.
Okay, we gotta get this out of here, folks.
Okay, what we might do, folks have been here since a while ago. Let's take a quick break, come back in, go straight into a closed session real quick. We do have discussion of the Amarillo Hospital District budget. That was review only. We can carry that forward and review it next week and still be okay in our approval cycle.
Okay.
But I've got some stuff I really need to get to. Other things, and not, y'all already have all these, since I know that George and Kevin are both really hunting some material that they'd love to cover the front page with. These are maps that have your Public Works Division projects and your Utility Division projects for the proposed budget on a single sheet. That's not 100% of the capital of the city, but that's the bulk of the capital money.
Sure.
I've got one.
We've
I
got
already
plenty.
have one of these.
Hand them, you have those.
I thought we got a technical one. We
Yeah,
had a bunch of
we-
technical stuff.
I got it. Yeah, it has little blurbs in there.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have, I have that.
We have.
Look
it.
at
And
the
then,
second page.
For, the mayor referenced the big summary sheets, resource and expenditure.
Oh, you already got one?
No, you didn't do that. Guys, that is the, in as much of a nutshell as you can crunch the entirety of the city budget, that's it. Okay, that's by fund on each sheet. It shows money where you start, money in, money out, money where you end. Okay? I really think this will be good enough for, I don't know, maybe 15 articles between now and the final adoption of the budget.
He's through. I think it's passed out.
Are we gonna take a break?